Okay. So, welcome to the Desert Zen Center. My name is Thich Tam Pho Minh. As all the ideas about what could I possibly talk to you about today? Because it's been a marker week for me in a way, and so I'll just report on. I'm sure some of you were here for a talk about my new part-time job as a crossing guard, and like any new job, we start out full of hope and optimism, and then by the end of the semester, we're kind of a hardened veteran. And so I'm going to talk a little bit just about how that sort of thing evolved. And not worry about the fact that this silly phone has decided to just stop working. The original idea for this, you ought to just get out and do something in the community, and this was seemed like kind of a fun idea, and the way it was pitched was it's really easy. Most of the lights have buttons that people push and they cross and everything works okay. You're just kind of a person in a vest with a sign, and you just make sure nobody gets hit, including yourself. And there was very little training. That basically was the training, which is, and you're working with elementary school students, and so that's going to work out okay, because I mean the biggest problem there is the parents. They have their ideas, but the kids are good. And so I did that for a couple of months, and then my supervisor said, if you want a permanent corner, which is kind of nirvana here when you're an alternate, we've got a spot open, and I tried it for a while, and it was okay, but I had some misgivings because the corner has no lights on it. It's it's the only crossing guard that has anything to do with the dreaded intermediate school. So now you're not really crossing compliant 3rd and 4th, 5th graders. Now you're crossing more closely fully realized semi-adults in the 7th and 8th grade. And depending on your day, your job is a lot like most any job. There's good parts to it, and there's bad parts to it. I enjoyed the good parts, certainly initially, when you get like flowers stolen from somebody's yard as a gift, or an otter pop, or a piece of candy. Hey, mister, here you go. And so that stuff was all cool, but the whole thing changed a little bit when I moved to the corner across from the intermediate school. And it was still good, and it's a fun sort of a Buddhist-y, to use one of Larry's words, Buddhist-y kind of analogy to make the entirely overblown but pretty accurate Buddhist Mahayana link to the idea of crossing to the other side. But that's a key element. That's what makes Mahayana Buddhism different than Hinaya Buddhism. Hinaya Buddhism, we meditate, We become enlightened, and then our next responsibility is just to keep wandering in the woods and keep our ascetic practice going until we die. And that's really kind of the way that works. It's a personal sort of an idea about how Buddhism should be translated into practice. The Mahayanists, though, like us here, and all the Zen communities across the world, take this idea of helping individuals cross to the other side and become enlightened as a key proponent of what we do. It's a higher level, if you will, and in Zen we want to be careful about the high and the low and making those distinctions, but for the purposes of our discussion, it's a higher level of practice and enlightenment, because our enlightenment is something that we practice on every day, but won't be fulfilled until every human being who has lived, is living now, or will ever live, becomes awake. So that's pretty daunting. I mean, for people who think that there is some magnificent enlightenment available to us here on the cushion, that's only the start, really. The idea is moving this idea of self-awareness and the compassion it leads to out into the world. And that's a pretty heavy lift for a cheesy crossing guard in a yellow vest and a goofy yellow hat. But that's kind of where we are. That's kind of what our days are like. Our days are Otter Pops, good day. 8th grader, staring at you defiantly because he doesn't want to go back on the sidewalk. He wants to wait literally in the sidewalk on the curb because he doesn't want to do what you want him to do. And so one has to figure out how we're going to deal with people who aren't even, who obviously they want to be crossed because they have to be in class or they'll be in detention. Or they don't want to be crossed, so it's really frustrating, obviously, because you want to help people get across, and you would think that they'd be amenable to maybe your help and your direction, but once again, that's really not necessarily the case. And so we have the struggles that we have when we have a job doing anything, right? And any task that fills our day. So it was let's just say it was a very good growth sort of experience, because it does put you in touch with your feelings about people who don't want to follow simple instructions because they think that for whatever reason they're just not going to do it. It's really important to live in the present moment, to make eye contact and get your crosser to understand that nothing's going to happen unless you just take a slight step back. So we can just do this, because it's really quite simple. We just go out here, and if you, and the other thing people don't want to do is they don't want to wait. It's so simple to cross that they're right behind you, and they don't understand that part of the benefit of having a knuckle-headed person in a yellow vest is that he can almost get hit rather than you almost getting hit. So it's tough to get 7th and 8th graders to just take a pause and just wait a second there so I can get out in case someone doesn't see you or comes into the cross guard. And I thought, well, that really doesn't matter so much. So for a while I was pretty much trying to be, I took that trying to be everybody's buddy approach. And that gets you so far, and then you kind of see that that's not going to work. And then I got a review of someone who kind of, I knew they were reviewing me, so I used all my best techniques and everything and asked people to wait. And then when I stepped off the corner, I turned around and asked them to wait again. These are all techniques that they want to see you do. And they came out and talked to me, and this woman from South Carolina or North Carolina was the manager of the group, and we met. Hi, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. Nice to meet you. It's interesting. She was a take charge kind of a woman, and I, to be quite honest, probably am not as much of a take charge kind of guy as she was a take charge kind of woman. She had a whistle. She was working the whistle. She was, you know, she was a crossing guard. I was kind of just a guy in a yellow vest. But, so my initial response was, okay. I kind of tried to say, but hang on. She's got some points, so let's just dial it down and listen to her and see what her point is. And her point was a good one, actually. Her point was, she had techniques that I thought, not for me, really. I mean, the whistle thing, you'd get beat up by burly intermediate schools for tweeting your whistle. But her point was a good one, which is, there's confusion here, because the kids don't know what you want to do. And so that's how she used her whistle. And it was fun. It was informative. The kids got a good laugh out of it. Some of the parents got a good laugh out of it, because even in junior high, in intermediate schools, even in intermediate schools, some parents come with their kids. Their kids have a challenge just walking to school, just getting to school. They've got some sort of barrier, or you know, they're neurodivergent in a way, okay? And so they're escorted to the crossing guard with a caring parent who gets them there and kind of hovers and makes sure they get across every morning. It's quite a display of love. And the next morning, though, they were so impressed by the whistle that they asked me, hey, where's your whistle? Now, my boss said, well, you don't really need to use a whistle, but you need to use your voice. You need to tell people, these 7th and 8th graders, what you want them to do. And you can't do it in kind of a random way. You really got to set up a pattern. And so the whole thing started to be, all right, wait here. That was the start. And then take a step and look and make sure they were waiting there, because some weren't. And the other thing that's a problem is people on e-bikes, because kids have e-bikes. And I thought of this because I thought it was appropriate in history. In history, a knight of old knew he was in trouble when he got dismounted from his horse. Riding a horse in the Middle Ages made a knight more invincible, gave him power. So to this day, that tradition kind of holds with kids on e-bikes. They don't want to be told to get off their e-bike until you begin a regular regimen of not doing anything until they get off their e-bikes. Not saying hi, not really telling them, get off your bike, wait here, I'm going to go out here, I'll tell you when you can cross. And I started to do that for the last 3 or 4 weeks. And I think it was just much better for everybody. You know, I wasn't, I didn't really pay attention to so much about what the vibe I was getting from these people, because it was nice to have most of the girls would say thanks, and a lot of the guys would say thanks. You were the first person you saw in their day, and the kind of stare downs and, you know, stuff about you got to get off that bike or blah, 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 back and forth, that those kinds of things were stressful for me, stressful for them, not the way you want to start the day. We're all just trying to get to the other side. That's all. And that's really it. It's understanding what's important to getting this effected, to getting this done. The real key to this kind of more systematic approach to crossing these kids was that right before the supervisor came, there was a report of a near collision, that the kid almost got hit. Now, I think this is a strategy they use to put all the crossing guards in the area on a defensive mode, because you're thinking, well, you know, just about every day, oddly enough, and that's not true because some days are worse than others, there are kind of close calls where people you thought were going to stop didn't stop, people intruded into the crosswalk, people made unexpected things happened. And that's probably the biggest fear of mine when I was doing this, was that unexpected things were going to happen. And people don't move through the crosswalk at the same rate or whatever. And so early morning, not a lot of people. A girl crosses, and she's younger, and she's going the wrong direction in the crosswalk. She should be coming to the elementary school, but she's going to the intermediate school. She's there. I've seen her once or twice before. She comes in. I step off. She immediately, without waiting, runs across the crosswalk, runs behind me before I can even get out to the middle to stop, and she almost gets hit by a woman who is preoccupied about her life and her day. And it was really, it made my heart pound a little bit about, oh my gosh, wow, that's too close. And she was able to stop short of the crosswalk, and it all resolved itself. But I thought that's what they were talking about when they said, oh, there was a close call. Well, that wasn't it at all. It was some other situation that another crossing guard told me about that was okay. Everything worked out fine, but somebody saw something and said, hey, that's not right. I guess the hardened veteran comment is really not so bad, because once again, that takes us out of the area of wanting people to like us for what we do, wanting people to respond to us, whereas the key thing to be doing is to be focusing on the doing rather than on the, oh, that's so nice that they gave me a flower. That's so nice that they said thank you. All these things that get us attached to outcomes, when it's the doing that's important. And I know that sounds really simple. But as a species, in our unawakened form, we're very much and can very quickly become attached to these outcomes. And that they color us and cause us to suffer when we think we didn't quite match up, something happened that we thought we were responsible for, that no one could foresee, and we did the best we could do. This is, I think, the key teaching, because so much of the practice focuses on the meditation practice. And that's a good gateway to bringing it into your day-to-day life, whatever it is you're doing. But it's like, we know we should not cling like this. And things happen, and we get so wrapped up and carried away that we forget to remember the simple fact that I am just trying to execute what I'm doing here and now, and that I need to have, and I've used this a lot, but it is so key to happiness. We have to have some compassion for ourselves, because so many of us get so wrapped up in a negative inner dialogue that it gets in the way not only of our practice, but our happiness, our feeling good about what we're doing. And then that carries over to a certain degree into the next thing we've got to do. We bring that baggage along with us because we're unable to, a lot of times, just let that go. Just like we do with a thought in meditation. Become aware of it. Accept it. Breathe and let it go. That's a meditation technique that I know I need to apply to just about everything I'm doing during my waking hours. And that's really all I've got to say, Stick with your meditation practice and understand how it relates to and is key to what it is you're doing. But one story, two stories, because, right, you know what I mean? Everybody talks a good game, and I'm just like everybody else. So the first one is from a guy who is a very sensitive kid, who I think he might be a little bit on the spectrum. And we got into a little bit of a thing one morning and my son, who's a little bit on the spectrum, told me, hey, here's what he was doing. His condition, what really bugs him most about the world, in his view, is injustice. And so some people over here were getting away with something, and I was trying to deal with it, and he was haranguing me from the other side about And I said, oh, I see him. And he went on and on and on, and literally got so frustrated with me that he went down the block, crossed, went over, and harangued me from the other side of the street. And I thought, oh my gosh, all right. Dorian has a problem, I guess, with the way we did that. So Anyways, the next morning, he's there. He's quiet, but he's always quiet. He's a little contrite. I'm sorry, I got a little carried away yesterday. I said, no problem, no problem. And so we had kind of built a relationship out of this after about 4 weeks or so. And so on Wednesday, the day before the last day, they got their annuals, right? And so everybody was happy. It was a lot of fun. Everybody was signing stuff, and it was a perfect day. It was a perfect day. Usually at the end of the day, they cross in giant packs and hordes because they're done and they just want to get away from their teachers and school. So it's a wave after wave after wave, and you got to deal with that, and that's fine. But the second to last day, it was like, I thought to myself, they should give annuals to kids every day because everybody's in a wonderful mood. And the flow in the crossing guard, and that's kind of where my head was for the whole period that I've been working. How's the flow this morning? Is it flowing or is it chunky or what's going on? And these kids were all talking, they were having a great time. It was the day before the last day, and it just flowed. They just flowed out of the school across the crossing guard into the community, and there was no stairs or whatever. Everybody got off their bike and walked across. Everybody's on their best behavior. They were happy. They were having a great time. They were relating to their friends. It was a pretty good day. And the second day then started with Dorian, who came up to me and said, pick a pen. He had 3 pens. And I made too much of it because I didn't understand what he was going to do. And I said, well, I like blue. And he said, okay, but you're not going to keep it. And I said, oh, right then. He had a spiral-bound book, brand new, no one written in it. Hands it to me and says, this is my annual, my yearbook. Will you fill it out for me? So I just wrote in there, you know, have a great summer, Mike the crossing guard. And 3 girls who were waiting in the crosswalk said, oh, I want to sign it. Can I sign it? Let me sign it. So they all started signing it, and the traffic flows, and they go across the street. And it was an interesting sort of a start to that day, because I think, once again, the students they're at their core, they have great compassion, great generosity. Dorian is not the coolest kid on campus, but they all made room for him in their world, in their way. And it was kind of sweet. And so this is the last story that I'll tell. So on this crosswalk, so there's a kid there that I would probably, because of this one I'm going to tell you about, I would kind of, and this is bad, but what the heck? You all know who Eddie Haskell is from Leave It to Beaver. He's kind of the guy who always was, I'm going to use the word, he was a kiss ass, you know what I mean? He'd always compliment Beaver's mom, Mrs. Cleaver, about how great something was and whatever, and he was, you were suspect about his intention and what he thought about things and how honest he was, okay? And I had this guy down as kind of like the Asian Eddie Haskell. He's a sweet guy. You could tell that the other students really thought he was a great guy. I don't know, but I make an assumption that probably the teachers thought he was an okay guy, but were obviously always keeping an eye on him. And he was always very polite to me. He always said thanks in the crosswalk and walked across, and he always had friends with him. And so it's the end of the day, he's walking across the street, crosswalk's full, and I can hear him, and he says, you know, I'm really going to miss you next year. And I laughed out loud because I thought that was just a sweet thing to say. So it was, you know, put a nice kind of little cap on the whole thing, with the possible exception of last night my boss says, oh, well, you're going to take seasonal time off, and so you can get a little money from EED for unemployment. You know, because this isn't a volunteer job. I get a whole $16 an hour for standing out there with a sign. And I did that last night, and you know, it's a deadline. If you do it, you got to wait another week, whatever. And I started Saturday evening and tried to do this online, and I thought, well, this is going to be easy because you don't have to go down to the office and stand in line and do all the other stuff. It's going to be, well, Saturday night, I got frustrated. I started early, 8 o'clock last night, and it kept locking me out and shutting me down and making my life miserable. And once again, you know, we just get so caught up in, this should be simple. All I need to do really is know how to work my phone, which is turned off. I should be able to do these things. You know, what? But I just worked myself into a situation where it becomes frustrating, everything becomes frustrating. It's kind of a big, giant piling on of the stuff that we all deal with when we're dealing with the stuff we're dealing with. And my point is, as I said a bit earlier, just have some love for yourself. Just have some compassion for yourself. Know that you're giving it your best effort, and your best effort is the best response to whatever comes up in our life. I know it's simple, but it's just one of those things that we tend to forget from time to time. So thanks so much for listening. I appreciate it very much.